Hello, our friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family.
Hello there, welcome back.
Welcome back, guys. So, we're talking about the mysteries of the North Pole, not Antarctica this time, but we're talking about the North Pole. Santa's Playhouse this time of year is all about, Santa Claus coming to town if you are somebody that celebrates. And of course, we understand there's always a myth, a legend, a tradition that's before the current one, that contains the current one, but maybe gives you a little bit more information as to where it really came from in the first place, as we're always trying to look a little deeper into everything that's hidden around us in plain sight.
Indeed.
If you follow along with that. So what are we looking at? We're looking at a map that is older than the year 1600 that shows here at the North Pole a black magnetic rock. There is a black rock at the North Pole, according to some maps. Again, ancient maps. And when we go back in time, are we actually seeing more accurate? History will tell us, the traditional historians will tell us that they didn't have a clue of what they were doing and they were way off. And we know better now. We have better technology, and we can verify with our own eyes that there is no land up there at the North Pole. It's just ice. And sometimes, maybe it's not as frozen as it once was. But when we look to this, we see there is a magnetic North Pole up there surrounded by land. And, if you look really closely at this map, you'll find some lands we could recognize. This is Greenland over here. Wow, that looks like the Scandinavian countries. That looks like Iceland over there. Oh, wait a minute, that was the famous Friesland, which is no longer there anymore. This is Canada, of course, Russia, etc. What is the truth, and why in the world would they have a black rock at the North Pole? Well, why do they have a black cube on Trump Towers? Maybe we should ask that question. Or what is the real story behind the Kaaba at Mecca, which is, again, a black cube? Pretty interesting. Did you know, again, that the hexagram itself can be, which is a 6-pointed star, by the way, can be also thought of in cube form? That's kind of curious, is it not? Oh, there is so much that's curious when we start going down this rabbit hole. There is a hexagram at a pole, the North Pole, of Saturn. They say it's just a storm that's been raging for a long time. Well, there's also stories about the rings of Saturn being artificial and actually being created. And there's also talk of Saturn giving off a frequency. In some circles, they'll tell you that frequency is captured by the moon, amplified, and sent here to Earth as part of a control net. Reality is far stranger than fiction, but still we have these maps. These maps that show the same thing. They show the North Pole not being devoid of land. No, in fact, there's these 4 different land segments. And at the center of it is a black rock. Admiral Richard E. Byrd, widely recognized for his 1926 flight over the North Pole, a journey he undertook with co-pilot Floyd Bennett, which is generally credited as the first successful flight to the pole. However, various speculative theories have emerged suggesting that Byrd's polar expeditions, particularly his latter missions, involved more than just geographical exploration. Some accounts claim that he flew into the hollow earth through a polar opening, encountering a hidden advanced civilization. These claims are often tied to the idea that Earth's poles contain massive openings, leading to a subterranean world. The notion that Byrd discovered the hidden inner entrance to Earth is primarily based on fictional or unverified sources. Well, so says, the AI. For instance, in a 2023 publication titled The North Pole and Inner Earth Chronicles, compiles work like The Secret Diary of Admiral Richard E. Byrd and The Smoky God, A Voyage to Inner World, which presents fictionalized narratives of Byrd's alleged journeys into the Earth's interior. These accounts describe encounters with a hidden civilization, lush landscapes, and even a master who expressed concern over humanity's use of nuclear weapons. However, no credible historical evidence supports these claims, and the papers of Admiral Byrd do not contain any documentation of such flights or encounters. Further speculation arose from the 1946 to 47 Operation High Jump expedition to Antarctica, during which Byrd led a large-scale military mission involving 13 ships and over 4,700 personnel. Some CONS piracy theories suggest during this mission he allegedly flew under the South Pole and discovered a temperate, crystal-like city inhabited by advanced beings. These stories are said to originate from a missing diary that was supposedly discovered by his son after his death, although no such document has been verified or released. The U.S. Navy and official records do not support these claims, and the expedition's documented goals were focused on military training and scientific research. In summary, while Admiral Byrd's actual achievements in polar exploration are well documented and respected, the idea that he discovered a hollow Earth or encountered inner Earth civilizations is a modern myth rooted in speculative literature and CONS piracy theories. Again, so they say us. Are there entrances at the poles into a hollow Earth, inhabited perhaps by more beings than occupy the surface, and certainly, according to accounts, inhabited by beings that are much more advanced than we are? This is a real popular topic. There's been so many books written on it, and yet, I think there's this fascination that more and more of us have with these ancient maps that, again, in the case of this, show a magnetic black rock at the North Pole. You got to wonder all the symbolism that's going on. The story of Eden, Meru. What is the truth? Hyperborea. How about Shangri-La? Shambhala. How about the secret chiefs of Blavatsky and the works of Annie Besant and Ledbetter and those, again, that were starting to delve deep into the wisdom of the East and yoga itself, and understanding that there's a lot of myths and legends around the world that always come back to the fact that we have these encounters with these beings that we take as gods, but just simply are more advanced beings than ourselves. They're more in the know. They understand the real history of the planet, and here we are in the dark with amnesia, trying to figure out what's really going on. Hyperborea, we start getting into different root races. We start getting into lost civilizations, Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu, etc. It's a fascinating, tangled web. Even the flat earth phenomena. This is a flat earth map. Again, shows everything is ringed by Antarctica. But also what's at the center. It's a North Pole that has land, and at the very center is, again, a black rock. Where did this come from? Well, you remember Gerald Mercator. Mercator's the one that gives us the map that we use for the USGS, for instance. You look at the USGS and you might recognize there's some inaccuracies with the map. For instance, Antarctica looks mammoth and it surrounds us all. It blocks off everything. And then how come Greenland is so big and Africa is so small? Again, it's a distortion that Mercator thought he had remedied as best as he can. When he takes something that's round and you flatten it, what happened was that you got things at the equator that appear smaller, things at the poles that appear bigger. Yes, tangled web indeed. Let me bring up Google Earth. I had this up before. We tried to do this video before, but we ran into problems. Google Earth is very, very interesting indeed. And is it covering up something? Make note first. You see the size of Africa. Now let's look at the size of Greenland. There it is. Obviously, there's a big difference between the size of Africa when you're looking at the roundness of this globe to Greenland. They're nowhere near close. In fact, Africa is 12 to 14 times larger than Greenland, as given here. And when you look at it here, it's a very obvious distortion. But the thing I wanted to look at here is when you're looking up at the North Pole, you see this little seam. This has been here forever. I think Mr. MBB has made note of this in the past. There is this seam here. Why is there this seam here on Google Earth? What are they trying? What's back there? What's in there? It looks like hidden lands waiting to be discovered, does it not? It's just peeking out, begging for somebody to ask the question, why is this the way it is? Why did they leave that seam? Right where, again, we would find these mythical lands.
I don't know. It's a fair question, and I don't think Wikipedia is going to answer it.
They're not going to answer it. And on Earth Null School, Earth.Null School, sorry, I'm bringing this up. There we go. You find another little anomaly that pops up when you're looking at the winds. There seems to be something that's here, right at the North Pole where that black rock's supposed to be, that has the winds, circumventing around it. There seems to be something that's influencing the winds over here. It's not too much of a stretch to wonder, could it possibly be that there is something there that's magnetic? Maybe whatever it is could actually have effect on magnetic pole reversal, magnetic pole excursion. We're in a magnetic pole reversal, so the science tells us at this point in time. Could this have some sort of bearing on that? It is fascinating. So, yes, when we look at this, here you go, right at the center, the story of this map. So this says, these days, climate scientists are looking hard at Arctic maps as the winter sea ice shrinks, cracks appear, trying to understand the reason for these changes and determine what should we expect in the future. So it goes on basically talking about the first known map of the Arctic. This is the Septentrionalium Terrarium, which is filled with magnetic stones, strange whirlpools, and colorful guesses? Yeah, the colorful guesses. They were just guessing. They didn't know. This map's creator, the Flemish cartographer Gerardus Mercator, I should say, is best known for the Mercator projection, the now famed method of taking the curved lines of the Earth, transforming them into straight ones that could be used on a flat map. This was invented for sailors who, thanks to its design, could use it to plot a straight line course from their point of origin to their destination. In 1569, Mercator came out with a map of the world based on this principle, which stressed from east to west, and he promised in his words no trace of any of the errors which must necessarily be encountered on the ordinary charts of shipmasters. In order to make his map useful for navigation, though, he had to sacrifice accuracy in other areas. Specifically, he had to stretch out the top and bottom parts of his map, making lands and seas in the far north and south appear disproportionately larger than those nearer the equator. This is also why so many people think Africa is the same size as Greenland, when it's really about 14 times bigger. And this is used in schools to this day. So what he made here was actually taken from, they say, something called the Inventio Fortunata, which literally means fortunate discoveries. It was a 14th century travelogue written by an unknown source where it traced the travels of an English minor friar of Oxford who traveled to Norway and pushed on further by magical arts. This mysterious book gave Mercator the centerpiece of his map, a massive rock located exactly at the pole, which he labeled Rupus Nigra et Altissima, or Black Very High Cliff. There you go. And again, this was something that was accepted to be there at that time and the times thereafter. Until our modern times, everybody accepted that there was some sort of black magnetic rock at the North Pole. Isn't that fascinating? Things that were accepted in the past that then get viewed as silliness. I mean, just craziness, lunacy.
Things that make you go,
Absolutely. And he draws the Arctic in 4 large chunks separated by channels of flowing water, which meet in the middle of a giant whirlpool. He got the idea from 2 16th century explorers, Martin Frobisher, and that name is so familiar to me, and James Davis, who each made it as far as what is now northern Canada. Oh, now I know Frobisher. That was one of the characters in the show Cloud Atlas. Frobisher. Yeah, so it's curious. I guess in Cloud Atlas, maybe somebody was making reference to this guy. Because Cloud Atlas was a really interesting movie about how souls reincarnate and interact with each other from different aspects as time goes on, and also the battle against the darkness that is eternal and documented through all of our religious texts. Pretty fascinating stuff. Anyway, these explorers who made it as far as was now northern Canada both documented their experiences with vicious currents, which they wrote pulled giant icebergs along like they were nothing. Without cease, it's carried northward, they're being absorbed into the bowels of the earth. Well, that sounds just like what we're talking about. Bowels of the earth. Into the earth? Into the hollow earth? Curious. Each piece of the Arctic has its own particular qualities according to Mercator's labels. The one in the lower right supposedly home to pygmies, who are 4 feet long. Likely another reference to Inventio Fortunata, which describes groups of small-statured people living in the polar regions. It's possible that the author of Inventio was referring to indigenous inhabitants of Lapland, perhaps. The one next door on the bottom left is apparently the best and most salubrious of all the chunks, although no evidence is given to support this or to explain why the pygmies then wouldn't want to live there instead. After Mercator died in 1594, explorers continued to gain new knowledge of the Arctic, and cartographers revised both the poles and their maps of the poles. By 1636, up-to-date maps of the region lacked Mercator's 4 regions, along with the Rupus nigra and the central whirlpool. Instead, they showed one large piece of land surrounded by smaller islands, and often adorned with the ship routes that enabled the geographical knowledge in the first place. So, were they covering up something? They still showed land there, but no more black rock. Yes, Inventio Fortunata. It's a lost book, possibly dating from 14th century, containing a description of the North Pole as a magnetic island. Rupes nigra again. Surrounded by a giant whirlpool and 4 continents. No direct extracts from it have been discovered, but its influence on Western idea geography of the Arctic region persisted for several centuries, till it was again either found to be a fake idea, for something that was just grounded in nothing real, or was it wiped out? Interesting that they describe it as being 33 French miles in size. 33. We know that's a code, guys. 33 is a code. So what are they doing with this? It's the way they talk to each other. Then when we look deeper into the story, it just gets very interesting. The book is said to be a travelogue written by a 14th century Franciscan friar from Oxford. Well, Oxford definitely has had its share of affluent people, along with, say, Harvard and Yale and some of these other Ivy League colleges, which, again, when you start looking into the illuminated group, they all tend to travel in certain circles. So, this friar was traveling the North Atlantic region in the early 1360s, making some half-dozen journeys, conducting business on behalf of the King of England, Edward III. He described what he found on his first journey to the islands beyond 54 degrees north. In a book, Inventio Fortunata, which he presented to the king. Was it all just fallacy? Was he just trying to make the king happy and to keep financing himself? That's a good likelihood, too. By the time Atlantic explorers were seeking information in the 1490s, the Inventio had gone missing. and it was only known through a summary in a second text, the Itinerarium, written by a Brabatian traveler named Jacobus Sionian, also known as James Sionian or Jacob van Koningen, modern-day equivalent to Knox. As will be discussed below, his summary was the basis for the depiction of the Arctic region on many maps, one of the earliest being Martin Beheim's 1492 globe. 1492, Columbus sails the ocean blue. We know all that. And again, what did Columbus discover? Absolutely nothing, according to the hundreds of millions that were living in the Americas when he arrived. I do think it's really fascinating to see the ties here, though. So the fact that this was used as a reference source, and there's even a letter from Flemish cartographer Gerardus Mercator to the English astronomer John Dee, the infamous John Dee. That was an occultist that contacted the Enochian angels and gave us Enochian magic. That John Dee. Isn't this really interesting? Who were those Enochian angels? Did they happen to look like little gray aliens? Time will tell. But anyway, this ties in even to King Arthur and legends of King Arthur settling this area in the deep past. It was just, it's just, you can't make this stuff up. It's pretty fascinating.
It's a lot of fun once you get into it.
And what's even more fun is the fact that Cindy received a channeling last night that we're going to share on Patreon and also on YouTube memberships directly about this. Because as this turns out, for the information that we've gotten from the Galactics, it's actually very real. And, what we've perhaps are discovering is that if you really want to get accurate information, you got to go way back into the past to stuff that has been ridiculed as just pure, just myth, legend, and not based on fact. Because again, the control system has done its very best to wipe out all the evidence and to rewrite history. So Knox's account, originally in his own language, translations here are based on Ava Taylor's version, mixes probable fact with what might have been his own attempts to research the background, saying that Greenland was first settled at the orders of King Arthur. King Arthur, the infamous King Arthur, who's the mythological King Arthur, whose army supposedly conquered the North Atlantic islands. He also refers to the indrawing seas, currents that drew ships northward, and did he mean inward into the hollow earth? Nearly 4,000 persons entered the indrawing seas who never returned. But in AD 1364, 8 of these people that came to the king's court in Norway, among them were 2 priests, one of whom had an astrolabe, which is kind of like a metal sheet, engraved sheet, who was descended from the 5th generation from a Brussels citizen. One, I say, all 8 were from those who had penetrated the northern regions in the first ships of the visiting Franciscan. He summarized the priest's report thus: leaving the rest of the party who had come to the islands, he journeyed further through the whole of the north and put into writing all the wonders of those islands, and gave the King of England the book, which he called in Latin Inventio Fortunata. So was this book removed by the Illuminati? That's the question, as you can see. So this gets you wondering, when we've seen these unusual anomalies like the South Atlantic anomaly, well, if there is something like this at the North Pole, is there something like this at the South Pole? Are they movable? If they are movable, then could they possibly have any influence on pole reversals? We are in the middle of a magnetic pole excursion right now. It's been moving. What if this black rock is movable? What if this island is not an island? Again, you just got to wonder, what do you guys think? That's what we want to know. What do you guys think? And then please do join us again on Patreon or also YouTube memberships. And we will be sharing what Cindy got in the middle of the night, about 1 o'clock, 1:30 a.m. She started channeling from the galactics. So we will share that with you guys there.
Source bless and namaste.
Much love and gratitude. Thanks for being on this ride with us. Look forward to your thoughts. Source bless and namaste.